About 3 years ago, the Wizarding World finally delivered on a promise that was decades in the making. Hogwarts Legacy wasn't just a game, it was a personal letter to Hogwarts for millions of us. And the release of Hogwarts Legacy wasn't just a launch, it was a major event. It shattered sales records, dominated every corner of the internet. What the developers did at Avalanche Software made pure magic. We waited our entire lives for a game in the Harry Potter universe that actually lived up to our expectations. And Avalanche Software did what many of us thought was impossible, and they struck lightning in a bottle. Now it's been almost 3 years since the release of Hogwarts Legacy. The initial hype has settled. The chatter online has for the most part stopped. But today I wanted to go back and dust off our old spell book and get our Harry Potter wands out and take a deep dive back into the world of Hogwarts Legacy. Has the magic of Hogwarts Legacy faded over the years? Or did Avalanche craft a truly timeless game? But before we dive into the experience of Hogwarts Legacy, let's first use our time turner and reflect a bit on the past. The build up to Hogwarts Legacy was a storm of both anticipation, unlike most any other single player games, but it also had its fair share of controversies. But the previous Harry Potter games were kind of a mixed bag. Some of the movie tie-in games were fondly remembered, like, Chamber of Secrets and Sorcerer's Stone. Other games about the franchise were pretty much cash grabs, but really none of them delivered on the core fantasy of becoming a student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Not to re-experience Harry's journey, but to create our own character and go through Hogwarts. And the potential of a Harry Potter game like something in the universe really was limitless. But when we finally got Hogwarts Legacy revealed and it launched, it sold over 12 million copies in its first 2 weeks alone, with it eventually surpassing 30 million copies sold by around late 2024. And in its first year, it became the most sold game of the year, beating out Call of Duty for the first time since a Rockstar game, which was forever ago. Let's just say Hogwarts Legacy wasn't just a successful game, it really was a cultural phenomenon. But the thing about a lot of single player games is they don't last forever. The real test of times is what remains when all of the hype has kind of died down. Let's start out with one of the game's crowning achievements, the thing that truly everyone appreciates. It's something that even the game's harshest critics can argue with, and that is the game world itself. More specifically, the Hogwarts Castle. For years, we've pieced together its layout from book descriptions, movie sets, Minecraft mods, and our own imaginations, but stepping through the front gates of Hogwarts Castle for the first time for many of us was genuinely emotional. I remember it like it was yesterday. I actually was given the opportunity to play the game early, and let me tell you, I was geeking out. Everything was there. The grand staircase with the shifting flights, the iconic Great Hall with the enchanted ceiling, all of the house common rooms, the kitchen, the Hufflepuff common room. It wasn't just a collection of, familiar places. It was a living and breathing world. Avalanche Software didn't just build a game level, they built a historical artifact almost. The level of detail in this castle, frankly, is insane, and I am absolutely obsessed with it. I probably spent dozens of hours just walking the corridors, doing the classic aura walking, finding so many secrets and, hidden references, statues that reveal themselves, all of the moving portraits, the puzzle doors, and so much more. The Hogwarts Castle really was a museum, a home, a puzzle simulator, all at once. And the sound design, can we talk about the sound design? What a masterful job at creating the atmosphere of the castle, hearing the distant chatter of the students, the whispers down the corridors, and the sound of spells that are echoing throughout the entire castle. Avalanche Software's commitment to the authenticity of Hogwarts Castle bled into all of the 4 house common rooms. Every single one of them just perfectly crafted. The representation and how I imagined they would look in my head, from the Gryffindor Tower to the dungeons of Slytherin to the perch of Ravenclaw and the incredibly cozy Hobbit-like basement of Hufflepuff. Now, your first major choice, your Hogwarts house, felt meaningful because of the sheer amount of effort poured into making every single one of those places feel authentic and just incredible. And it's one of the reasons why I'm happy we actually got to see what they looked like prior to the game coming out. It definitely helped me make my decision of my Hogwarts house on my first playthrough. But then you step outside of the Hogwarts Castle, that is when the world opens up, revealing not just the castle grounds, but the village of Hogsmeade, all set in the beauty of the Scottish Highlands. And Hogsmeade is simply perfect. Like, dude, going through and visiting Hogsmeade my first time was an experience that's kind of hard to describe. Everything is happening at once. Seeing all of the different shops, like tomes and scrolls and J. Pippin's potions, all contributed to making the game feel like a character-rich and authentic open world. But it's the Scottish Highlands that give this game its jaw-dropping scale. Flying on a broomstick for the first time is also a core memory of this game. For any of you that played it, which I'm sure a lot of you have, that first feeling of lifting off the ground, the wind rushing past you, the controller vibrating and the haptic feedback, immersing you even greater into the experience, the landscapes that are unfolding beneath you. This game truly was a joy to play. Like, I lost so many hours in this game just soaring the skies. A world that felt massive, but also giving you the freedom of flight, made it so I wanted to go out and explore the world. But nearly 3 years later, the major points of interest of this game, the Hogsmeade and Hogwarts Castle, were the two parts that I think held up the most. However, I do have my criticisms of the rest of the Highlands, and I think just like the rest of the open world, while it definitely seemed like it was vast and incredible, in terms of the depth of that experience though, it was a bit shallow, kind of making the experience as wide as an ocean and as deep as a puddle, or I guess in Hogwarts Legacy's sake, as deep as the Black Lake. No, you can't dive underneath the water, which is also unfortunate. Now, another aspect of the experience that I do believe holds up really well are the game's visuals. The hyper attention to detail to the game's lore and the visual atmosphere that create an immersive experience is still second to none. And in my opinion, Hogwarts Legacy is the definitive version of the Wizarding World, specifically Hogwarts Castle. This game was so successful in making you feel like you were truly at Hogwarts, living a fantasy that many of us had since childhood. And on that aspect alone, the magic hasn't faded one bit. If the world of Hogwarts Legacy is the soul, then the combat is the heart of the game. A fast, flashy, and quite addictive magic system and progression system that is relatively deep. Now, the past Harry Potter games have their spell system that often boiled down to spamming a single button, but Avalanche Software delivered something truly special. The combat in Hogwarts Legacy is a high-speed magical dance of attacking and defending. The whole system hangs on the genius idea of color-coded shields. Enemies protect themselves with a yellow, purple, or red barriers, which can only be broken by a spell that matches that category. The control, the force, and damage. Now, this simple mechanic alone forces you to really think like a duelist. You're not able to just rely on your favorite damage spell. You have to consistently read the room and use the right tool for the job. It turns every fight into a dynamic dance, and the tools you're given in game are also really diverse. The game just doesn't give you a handful of spells. It gives you the lot. Like, you have spells to lift and slam enemies like Accio and Depulso. There's spells where you could set your enemy on fire like Incendio, or using Confringo to transfer them into exploding barrels. Overall, Hogwarts Legacy has 34 various different spells for you to choose from, which the spell diamond in the game, or the hotkeys, let you hot swap between different loadouts, which I think is a great solution, but I do feel like there's a better system that they could use in the future. Like, the limited hotbar is a bit frustrating, especially when you're juggling 30 plus spells. Perhaps with the next game, they can use like an emote wheel or something like that. But where I think the combat of Hogwarts Legacy truly shines is the combos. Now, the combos really aren't just about breaking shields, it's about creating a symphony of total destruction. A typical fight might go Accio to pull an enemy close, and then you hit them with a basic combo, launch them into the air with Levioso, to then hit them even further, and then slam them down onto their friends with Descendo. What I love about the combos is it encourages creativity, and it really does reward you. Like, once you master chaining spells, the gameplay loop starts to get incredibly addicting. Like, the ability to just manage crowds of goblins and dark wizards in such an incredibly fluid and satisfying fashion is something that I will always appreciate about this game. But then there is the ancient magic. So as you build your combo meter, you can actually unleash devastating blows and cinematic finishing moves with the ancient magic, which the ancient magic system just brings another level of, depth to the overall gameplay and combat. It's the perfect way to completely defeat an enemy. You hit them with the wombo combo and then you completely destroy them by using your ancient magic, making you feel like the uniquely powerful wizard that the story says you are. But it wouldn't be magic without talking about the unforgivable curses. The decision to include the Cruciatus, the Imperius, and Avada Kedavra was a bold move, mainly because of the implications of those spells, but I thought that they implemented them pretty well. Funny enough, in my first playthrough, I never used a single unforgivable curse because I was role-playing as myself going to Hogwarts, and I would never use an unforgivable curse. But you do get the sense of the forbidden power when you cast them. Like, there's just something about using the Avada Kedavra curse the first time, and the ability to instantly kill almost any enemy with a single button press is exactly as game-breaking and terrifying as it should be. And that's why nearly 3 years later, the combat in Hogwarts Legacy still feels really fresh. However, I do think that there is some room for improvements. It is accessible enough for players that are casual, and it has enough depth for those that want to master it. But I think the most important part is the fact that it's just really fun. While some fights can get a little repetitive late in the game, some enemies might feel a bit spongy, the core loop of chaining spells, getting those combos, and breaking shields is one of the most enjoyable combat systems in recent memory. So yeah, I think the biggest things that they can improve on is maybe fix the actual weapon diamond, maybe make it a wheel so it's easier, and also we need more spells. Like, we had 34 in this game, but come on, if you do Hogwarts Legacy 2, you gotta give us all the spells, or at least a lot more spells. This brings us to the narrative side of things, and this right here is where things get a bit complicated. Hogwarts Legacy doesn't really have one contained story. I mean, it does in a way, but it does have several other stories to tell, and the quality gap between them is massive. It really is a tale of two games. You've got the kind of forgettable high stakes fantasy of the main plot, and then the intimate and character driven side stories. Well, let's jump into the main story itself. With Hogwarts Legacy, you're a 5th year student who can wield the rare ancient magic, which his power is being hunted by Ranrock, the goblin leader, who believes wizards have unjustly hoarded magic. And then there is Victor Rookwood, who is the generic and depressingly dark wizard who didn't stick the landing for me, despite hoping for more. You're guided by the Keepers, who are a group of dead professors and portraits who lead you through a series of trials. Now, on the surface, it does sound pretty epic, but in actual practice, like, the game itself is surprisingly shallow and, you know, just a bit flat. The main plot is the typical hero trope that suffers from a lack of, like, personal stakes in the story. The conflict is a bit all over the place. You're in the middle of a grand battle of good versus evil over a vague and, you know, all-powerful ancient magic. Now, Ranrock, despite having a, you know, understandably, like, you know, motivation, but Ranrock is a pretty one-dimensional villain, and Rookwood is so far beyond, like, even being considered as a main villain in this game. Like, he barely registers. I mean, he is a villain, but not really. I mean, if that boss fight was a bit better, I would probably enjoy Victor Rookwood more, but I just don't. Now, the Keepers are basically there for exposition, and the trials that they give you are often, like, really disconnected tutorials, almost feeling like a random shrine in a Legend of Zelda game. However, the main story isn't terrible. It's just, you know, it's there. It gives you the sense of an overarching conflict, but in my first playthrough and my recent playthrough, it doesn't really make you feel anything. And almost 3 years later, it's the part of the game that I think most people struggle to remember. But then enters the legendary Sebastian Sallow. The main story is forgettable, but then there is Sebastian's questline, which is like an HBO drama that everyone wants to go back and watch. It is without a doubt the narrative heart of Hogwarts Legacy. Sebastian Sallow, as you guys know, is a Slytherin whose twin sister Anne is suffering from an agonizing curse. Sebastian is desperate to save her, and he begins exploring the dark arts, thinking that the answers lie in forbidden magic. Now again, this right here is where the game truly feels special. Sebastian Sallow's story really is personal and desperate pull to the dark arts. And you're not just watching Sebastian descend into darkness, you are his accomplice. And really, you're his enabler. You follow him into the darkest corners of the magical world and learning the unforgivable curses along the way. Each step down this path is dark, but necessary, forcing you to ask the question, how far really is too far to save somebody you love? Now, unlike the main plot of this game, your choices here really do feel like they matter. Deciding whether you want to learn an unforgivable curse is a moment that I will never forget. experiencing the arguments between Sebastian, his sister, and their uncle, all masterfully done with writing that is both heartbreaking but also powerful. Now, I think there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that said that this right here should have been the main plot of the game, and I think it's really hard to disagree. It has the personal stakes, the moral conundrum, and the character drama that the main story just lacks entirely. Now, the other companion quests are also enjoyable, but they don't really reach the same levels as Sebastian Sallow's, and really looking back at things, I think it's very clear that they spent most of their time working on the Sebastian Sallow end of things, and the other aspects were there, but they just weren't nearly as good. They didn't have the polish that I thought they could have had. And I do think the overall narratives, the side quests and the main quest, have some pretty big consistency issues like I mentioned. It almost feels like that there was two different writing teams that are working on two different games almost. The main team created a generic fantasy epic with a hero trope, while the other crafted powerful character studies. I think the strength of Sebastian's story really does highlight the weakness of the main plot, which revisiting this game 3 years later, it does give you a bit of like consistency issues, almost like a whiplash, where you're like, holy crap, this is so peak, and then boom, you're in generic dungeon fighting just like goblins. Hogwarts Legacy was sold as an open world action RPG, which it nails the action and open world parts, but almost 3 years later, the RPG element really is kind of just non-existent. And you could clearly see that the developers had a plan in mind with creating an in-depth RPG. However, time is money and money is time. And because of that, the overall role-playing aspect of it is the biggest weakness. You can ask pretty much anybody who played it. I'm sure you guys will also agree, and you'll hear the same thing. It's a fantastic Harry Potter simulator if you want to jump into a game and experience Hogwarts Castle for the first time. Bringing back all of that nostalgic is great for those people. But if you're looking for something that's more in-depth or a RPG, the game is a mediocre and non-existent role-playing game. Like in a game that is called Hogwarts Legacy that's supposed to be about your legacy, they sure do a bad job at like letting you live your legacy. And I think one of the most glaring issues is the loot system, where they constantly shower you with a bunch of gear. And the problem is it's all just for incremental stats and various different like cosmetics. The only thing that really matters is the item's level and its offense and defense number. Now you are able to add like traits and stuff like that at the enchanted loom, but the thing is like whenever you're finding gear every like 10 or 15 minutes that's way better than the current stuff you're wearing, it almost makes it like a bit pointless. Now there is a transmog system where you can like, you know, use whatever cosmetic you want, which I do think that's cool, but it also does make it so that the loot you're grabbing, like all the gear you're getting, is just for a cool stat. Like that is really all it is. Like you have a cool scarf that you're wearing, but then you find another one that's like really ugly. You just immediately switch the cosmetic to whatever design you want, making that item that you just grabbed literally just a number, and that's it. But I do think that the transmog system really is a band-aid on a problem that really shouldn't exist. The gear system isn't great at all. It really is just a tacked on mechanic with the goal of creating the illusion of an RPG that has depth. But again, like the other aspects of the game that are negative, like the Scottish Highlands and like the outskirts of Hogwarts Castle, it is as wide as an ocean, but as deep as a puddle. And then if you like don't do all of the other side activities to increase your inventory slots, you're constantly having to do like tedious inventory management, then actually having an exciting character to build on. But as I just mentioned, the shallowness extends to the open world. While the open world is beautiful, but the things you do in the open world are really repetitive and they just get boring fast. Which the biggest example for that are the Merlin trials, where they have 95 various different trials that you need to increase your gear space. And that's about it. You'll have seen pretty much all of the different puzzle types within the first few hours. All other 80 plus are just recycled versions of the quote unquote puzzle you did a dozen other times, doing a few like simple tasks. It's almost like they deliberately tried to pull a Breath of the Wild, where they're like, hey, if you want to do all of these Korok seeds, you can, but guess what? At the very end, we're gonna give you a golden piece of poop. In some ways, I would have rather had that golden piece of poop than, you know, having to painstakingly do 95 Merlin trials. The open world activities really are just icons on a map that all lead to what feels like busy work, a checklist simulator to complete rather than an adventure to explore. I really hope Hogwarts Legacy takes a lesson from, you know, Sucker Punch with Ghost of Yotei and Ghost of Tsushima, where they kind of show and don't tell, let the player experience the world and complete the tasks rather than just giving us a bunch of busy work. But I think what really grinds my gears the most 3 years later is the lack of actual meaningful choice in this game. The game does give you dialogue options, but they really don't affect much. This game literally lets you just do whatever you want to do. Hey, you want to use the unforgivable curse without having any consequences? Go for it. You can do that. You know that same unforgivable curse that lands you in a life sentence in Azkaban if you use it? Yeah, well, in Hogwarts Legacy, you can cast Avada Kedavra every single duel and do it right in front of a professor and nothing happens. Literally no comments, no one reacts. There's no penalty for using unforgivable curses in this game. The side characters you interact with doesn't change anything. There's no alternative story pathing or narrative branching. It literally is like, hey, here's an unforgivable curse, go buck wild, no consequences. And 3 years later, this right here is the most glaring issue for me. In a game that's supposed to be a RPG, what's the point in giving the player the unforgivable curses if there's no consequences for using them? It makes the unforgivable curses meaningless. And what I think is the most annoying and like all these years later still angers me is you've got Sebastian's quest, right? Like if you haven't played the game, with Sebastian Sallow's quest line, you essentially get to decide his fate. You could choose to turn him in and send him to Azkaban for utilizing the unforgivable curses, or you could decide not to and everything goes on their merry way. And I'll say this, anyone that chooses to send Sebastian to Azkaban, but then willingly uses the unforgivable curses in this game, it's like, what are we doing here? We're sending Sebastian to freaking Azkaban because he used unforgivable curses, and we're out here just doing it willy-nilly. So yes, for Hogwarts Legacy 2, they really have to take all of these half-baked mechanics and give the depth that we deserve in them. Give us a branching storyline, make it so that there's consequences, give us a morality slider in the game. For the sequel, make it so Hogwarts Legacy 2 truly is our legacy and not the predetermined legacy that the developers give us. So nearly 3 years later, what is the legacy of Hogwarts Legacy? Well, I think from a business side of things, the legacy is undeniable. It stamped itself as the most sold game of the year when it released. With over 30 million copies sold, it was a massive financial success for Warner Brothers, and it still is one of the best-selling games of the generation. It also proved that there is a massive market for a big budget, single-player game in the Harry Potter universe. Like in an industry leaning towards live service, like Warner Brothers games themselves want more live service games, the success of Hogwarts Legacy was really powerful. I think Warner Brothers now sees the benefit of single-player games, and they also see Hogwarts Legacy as not a one-off experience, but a long-term franchise they need to support. Hogwarts Legacy 2 or the sequel isn't just likely, it is considered a very big priority for Warner Brothers. And that right there is a reason to be excited. Hogwarts Legacy didn't have like an easy launch either. The game's launch was tied to the controversy surrounding J.K. Rowling and all of her public statements leading to calls for boycotts of Hogwarts Legacy, but despite this, the huge sales show that for most players, the desire to explore the wizarding world transcended all of the other conversations. And for a lot of people, Hogwarts Legacy was just a fun experience. The world building and combat were praised in the industry. Like those were the two aspects that many people really praised. Like the world building, the attention to detail, and the combat system were probably the best aspects. On the other side though, the non-existent RPG elements and the forgettable main story serve as a room for improvement, have you? But almost 3 years later, the game is still pretty positive. I do think the honeymoon stage is a bit over. Fans love it for what it is, the ultimate Hogwarts experience, while understanding that the game does have flaws and just accepting it for what it is. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I think that the lack of post-launch DLC is such a big miss. However, I do think that the support of PC modding is a good thing, like giving the community tools to breathe new life into the game without the developers having to do it is great for the players on PC. I do think that Hogwarts Legacy needs to get console mods. Avalanche, if you're listening, give us console mods. We all want it, especially for the players that only play on console and not on PC. But regardless though, I do think the legacy of Hogwarts Legacy is a foundation. It's not a perfect game, but it is a perfect starting point. Avalanche nailed the combat system. They nailed the Hogwarts castle. style, the game really makes you feel like a Witcher wizard with the exaggerated swagger of a 5th year, beautifully complemented by the fantastic combat system. Hogwarts Legacy 1 laid the groundwork, but now the expectation for the sequel is to build on that foundation, give us more RPG mechanics like the morality slider, give us a story that's interesting from start to finish, give us a branching storyline, and whatever you do, do not make it a live service game. Give us Quidditch, give us the Wizard's Chess, give us gobstones, but if you try to make it live service, Warner Brothers, if you're listening, get your fingers out the cauldron and let Avalanche cook. So the question still remains, has the magic of Hogwarts Legacy faded after nearly 3 years? In which I will say the answer is pretty complicated. Obviously, the honeymoon phase has fully worn off. The nostalgia of being in the world of Hogwarts Castle and Harry Potter is no longer enough to hide the flaws that the game has. The main story is pretty forgettable. The RPG mechanics, especially the gear system and repetitive open world sections, are pretty shallow in hindsight, and I do think that that is an area that they have to improve. And then there is the illusion of choice that a lot of, quote unquote RPGs experience. They end up being more action adventure games than actual RPGs. In Hogwarts Legacy 2, there has to be consequences for your actions. Using an unforgivable curse has to lead to negative consequences. So Hogwarts Legacy, after about 3 years, still holds up relatively well. It is a phenomenal world, but a mediocre RPG that you really shouldn't even call it an RPG. It has an incredibly addictive and fun combat systems in the genre, but just don't expect to get really anything from the main quest. Like I promise you, if you play this game for the first time, I need you to just focus on the side stories. Specifically Sebastian Sallow. If you haven't played through that mission, or if you haven't played the Haunted Hogsmeade quest, like that right there is some of the best that Hogwarts Legacy has to offer. So if I could directly speak with Avalanche, like lean into those aspects. That part is what makes Hogwarts Legacy so effective, and it's why we all still remember it till this day. Now, I do think Hogwarts Legacy does fulfill the, nostalgia. It really does make you feel like you are a student at Hogwarts, but it does fail to deliver some of the, classroom activities that we would hope for. And yes, Avalanche, that means make us a student, give us more lessons. And in terms of the narrative, make it a choice-driven role-playing experience that makes the player feel like it really is their legacy and not just a predetermined legacy. So is Hogwarts Legacy a timeless classic? No, not at all. But is it still a magical and almost like essential companion for any fan of the Harry Potter books? Definitely. Yes, the game is flawed, but for the first Harry Potter game in a long time, this game was and still is exactly what I need it to be. And now all eyes are set on the future with the Hogwarts Legacy sequel. And speaking of the sequel to Hogwarts Legacy, the success of the first game has already confirmed that the sequel game is in development. Warner Brothers has put this game at the top priority for the studio. And now that we're about 3 years out from the release of the first game, could we be close to Hogwarts Legacy 2 finally getting revealed? Hogwarts Legacy 1 took about 5 years to make, starting from mid-2017 and releasing in early 2023. So if they're already 3 years deep into the development for Hogwarts Legacy 2, and according to, Warner Brothers and the CTO, this game is a high priority for them, one would think that Hogwarts Legacy 2 is already entered full development, which means the reveal could be just around the corner. It's also worth mentioning that the game is a sequel, and usually sequel games don't take nearly as long to develop. So with this game being in development for about 2 or 3 years, realistically, we only have probably another year or two, maybe even next year, where we get our first teaser for the Hogwarts Legacy sequel. But just like the first game, I am sure that Avalanche Software isn't going to say anything or show us anything until the development is well underway. And they're definitely not going to release this game until it's absolutely ready. We saw that with Hogwarts Legacy 1 with all of the countless delays. So I guarantee that same thing is going to happen with this time around as well. Now, the potential sale of WB does have me concerned about the future of Hogwarts Legacy and Harry Potter. For instance, if a company like, let's say, Netflix buys up WB, it doesn't really inspire faith that they can, oversee all of the games that are currently in development by WB Games. But all we can do is hope that if they, decide to buy WB, that the sequel to Hogwarts Legacy is so far in development that it would be impossible to cancel the game, not that they would. But that's going to wrap it up with this video, guys. Let me know in the comments, what is your verdict of Hogwarts Legacy after nearly 3 years? And most importantly, what do you guys want to see from a sequel? Should it be a refined single player experience that deepens the RPG mechanics? Or would you rather have something like Hogwarts Legacy where it's more of an action adventure game? Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on so you're not missing out on any future gaming news like this one. If you guys like my deep dives, definitely subscribe to the channel. And until next time, guys, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Mischief managed.